Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. On behalf of Impact Austin, I would like to welcome y'all to our final 2022 Discovery Day session. We're going to be doing a deep dive today on the funding landscape in Central Texas. My name is Ami Kane, and I am a proud Impact Austin member, as well as a staff representative from one of Impact Austin's community partners, the Girls Empowerment Network. Thank you again for joining this afternoon. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our Discovery Day sponsors, who you just heard from first up, our title sponsor, Baird Private Wealth Management, and shout out to Susan, and our premium sponsors, C2C Media and FVF Law. In a few minutes, we will be having a robust conversation with some of the other major funders in Central Texas who help support our community's unique needs. After the panel, we're going to be hosting breakout sessions, so please stay on the webinar for an opportunity to continue to discuss and network with fellow attendees. If you're brand new to Impact Austin today, we are a local collective women's philanthropy group open to any female identifying philanthropist who wants to pool their resources to make a bigger impact in our community. Our mission is to cultivate and expand the knowledge, passion, and generosity of our members, and to make a positive impact by developing strong relationships and leveraging the power of collective giving. After we pool our resources every grant cycle, we make grants through grant review committees to narrow down the applicants to 2 finalists in each focus area. The top vote getter will get the primary grant, which is 80% of the dollars collected for that focus area, and the other finalist receives a secondary grant at 20%. And we're actually kicking off our grant review cycles right now. And if you're on the community team, I will see you at some meetings soon. To date, one member at a time, Impact to Austin has donated over $7.87 million to Central Texas nonprofits since our founding. We could not do this work without past and current members, and the needs are greater than ever. If you're not already a member, I'm really hopeful that you will consider joining us today. If cost is a barrier, please reach out to Impact Austin and we will find a way to make it happen. In fact, I know firsthand about this commitment because I first joined in 2014 on a community partner scholarship. These days, I'm a real big fan of that monthly payment donation option, which has made membership accessible for a nonprofit professional like me. And it has been an incredible opportunity for me to learn about the great work of organizations outside my subsector, to network with women who are as passionate as I am about meeting the needs of the community, and to be seen and truly valued for my nonprofit expertise. In fact, since joining, I actually shifted my perspective. I no longer see myself as a fundraiser working with philanthropists. I actually see myself as a part of Central Texas philanthropy. And I'm so hopeful that more of you will join us. You can learn more at impactaustin.org. I have a couple of quick reminders before we get started. You can use the Q&A function on the webinar to submit your questions, and we will answer audience questions with the panel towards the end of the session. To react, comment, or access any of the resource links that will be shared, please see the chat box. And we are also recording today's session, so you'll be able to reference it after today, share it with others, and the video will be up on our website. So we're going to get started now. First up, we have an opportunity to ground ourselves in a brief overview of community needs and issues in Central Texas. If you've been attending the other previous Discovery Day sessions, then you've heard quite a bit of this information, but we're going to create a foundation today before our panel. And we are super lucky to have Courtney Bailey joining us for this. Courtney is the Director of Issues and Engagement at Leadership Austin and a member of Impact Austin's Strategic Advisory Council. At Leadership Austin, her main focus is to connect people, ideas, and actions in order to inspire change and improve the civic health of Greater Austin. We're so grateful for her presentation, and I will hand the mic off to her.
Thank you, Amy. So good afternoon, everyone. And as Amy said, I'm Courtney Bailey with Leadership Austin, and I want to start out by defining social justice for you. So social justice is defined as a process, not an outcome, which 1, seeks fair redistribution of resources, opportunities, and responsibilities. 2, challenges the roots of oppression and injustice. 3, empowers all people to exercise self-determination and realize their full potential. And 4, builds social solidarity and community capacity for collaborative action. Someone once said that social justice dies when it becomes a matter of affordability. Well, according to a report published by the Austin Community Foundation, Central Texas is the 9th least affordable metropolitan region in our country. The region has become very attractive to live in, and is even attracting big tech companies. However, as our region continues to see a spike in population growth, hourly wages remain flat or stagnant. And nowadays, renting has become more affordable than buying a home. And though renting may be cheaper, rising rental prices make it harder for many residents to live. So where are people going to find more affordable dwelling? They are moving farther and farther away from central locations and jobs, which increases traffic and creates longer commutes. In addition, the impact of housing affordability has been very devastating to our most vulnerable communities. The poverty gap is widening, and more of our neighbors are being confronted by the possibility of homelessness. And as my grandmother would say, some folks are just one paycheck away from living on the streets. And the Department of Housing and Urban Planning defines affordable housing as housing that can be obtained by a household for 30% or less of its gross income. Families who pay more than 30% of their income for housing are considered cost burdened and may have difficulty affording necessities such as food, clothing, transportation, and medical care. And according to Texas Housers, the state of Texas ranks nearly last in affordable housing for its lowest income renters. Additionally, the Texas Housing Association reports that the wait list for public housing in Central Texas is about 3 to 6 months. And the wait for a 1-bedroom is even longer, at an estimated 36 months. If folks can't afford to relocate, they are forced to take whatever they can get, even if it is less than quality. And so it's been long understood that where you live can determine your health, education, and economic outcomes. For children, growing up in poor neighborhoods is associated with reduced educational attainment and lower adult earnings. Low-income students tend to be Black and Latinx, while higher income students are majority white. These students are living with parents or guardians who are struggling to pay bills and put food on the table, which can impact how they are able to show up for their child's education. As reported by Housing Matters, living in poor quality housing in marginalized neighborhoods is associated with lower kindergarten readiness scores. Students living in poor neighborhoods are more likely to switch schools due to housing and financial issues in the family. And constant moving can impact the overall mental and emotional well-being of a child. And homeless students face even greater challenges that impact both their ability to excel in school and their health and wellness. In addition, people with less education and fewer resources are more likely to live in low-income neighborhoods that lack resources for quality healthcare. For example, both rural and low-income areas tend to have a shortage of primary care physicians and other healthcare providers. Poor neighborhoods tend to be located in food deserts, where there's less access to grocery stores and other health options. And these neighborhoods also tend to have less green space and opportunity for physical activities. And it has been proven that access to better jobs and higher earnings can improve access to healthcare, health insurance, paid leave, and retirement plans. This can make it easier to plan for the future. And as a result of being in a pandemic for 2 years, the future might already appear bleak for some folks, as we're just trying to get through our day-to-day, right? And sadly, these issues existed before the pandemic, and they will continue to exist long after. However, the philanthropy community has a real opportunity here. As a call to action, I, along with Impact Austin, challenge all leaders in philanthropy to rise to the occasion of working on these issues in a more collaborative, just, and meaningful way. Philanthropy is more than just money. It involves not just looking at people as figures and data, but involving them in your process and exploring all resources while using culturally responsive approaches. It also means being more critical of those processes. We have to ask ourselves, are we building and sustaining real trust with communities who are most impacted by the affordability issues in our region? Are we addressing these issues in isolation or seeking to understand how they intersect? Are we able to recognize and respond to root causes such as systemic racism? In other words, are we consciously using a racial equity lens? And you know something, today's panelists are grappling with these exact same questions in their work and respective spheres of influence. And I'm looking forward to learning about their efforts. And so my hope is that you will listen with an open mind and heart, even if you think you've heard it all before. I encourage you to listen more closely until we can all truly get it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. That was extremely helpful, and I feel very much called to action already and excited to dig more into our conversation. Thank you for providing us that foundation. It's now time for us to turn toward the other regional funders who we have joining us today. As both an Impact Austin member and a nonprofit fundraiser, it is a real big honor for me to get a chance to have this discussion with powerhouse women in philanthropy like those we have joining us. So we're going to hear from Abena Asante, Felicia Peña, and Suzy Pukys. And instead of me just rattling off bios, I actually would love to get started with having each of our panelists share more about themselves, their background, and their current role. And we're actually going to start with Abena.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. And I'm Abena Asante with St. David's Foundation, and it's a pleasure to join you all here this afternoon. I'd like to give Courtney a big shout out for an excellent framing, and also Impact Austin for this great opportunity to participate in Discovery Day 3 with my fellow panelists, Suzy Pukys and also Felicia Pena. I'd like to start briefly with sharing who I am, as that has influenced the role that I am in today. And I bet you are also wondering, where's this accent from? So I don't want you to have to figure it out as we talk. So I grew up in a developing country, Ghana in West Africa, in a community that looked like me, that supported me, that gave me strength and empowerment to be who I am today. So I came to the US to undergrad as well as grad school, and I intentionally pursued a career path in public health and philanthropy because of what I saw growing up in terms of a whole lot of need around me, and also witnessing people in my community giving back even with a little that they have. My parents, for example, were involved in philanthropic activities, including setting up an educational trust fund to support youth in their villages to attend college. So it was only natural that I would pursue a similar path. So I've been with St. David's Foundation for almost 6 years. And so for those of you not familiar with St. David's Foundation, we're a health funder that covers 5 counties here in Central Texas: Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Williamson, and Travis. And I lead the Thriving Rural Communities portfolio. So it's from that lens that most of my comments today would be shared. Thank you.
Do you want me to go next, Amy?
Yes, please, Felicia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Felicia Peña, and I work in public affairs at HEB. And some background on myself. So I am previously a nonprofit fundraiser and can still consider myself a fundraiser in some aspects. I worked at the Central Texas Food Bank for about 6 years in community engagement and event fundraising, and loved my time there, and previously was also at United Way for Greater Austin. So love my nonprofit world, and I'm excited to be able to contribute to nonprofits in a way that's meaningful through the work that we do at HEB. And at HEB, we have some philanthropic pillars that I think many of you on the call are familiar with when it comes to disaster relief and hunger relief and education. But to Courtney's point earlier, I'm excited to talk about the ways that we're also tackling racial injustice and all the systemic racism that we've seen in our communities in a way that's meaningful. And I have been in Austin now for about 15 years, and I've seen a lot of growth over the past several years, and excited to be a part of the community in a way that allows me to give back in a way that makes sense. So thank you all for having us. Thank you to Amy for allowing me to be on this panel and inviting me to be sitting here amongst some really awesome philanthropists in town. and excited to hear from everyone else too.
Hi, everybody. I think I'm next. It's an honor to be here. I'm Suzy Pukys with the Georgetown Health Foundation. I've been working for the Health Foundation for the last 10 years, but spent the decade prior as a nonprofit program director for a local child advocacy organization, and then at Southwestern University in Georgetown. So over those years, I relied heavily on grants to support the work I was doing, as well as myself and my family and my staff. So I definitely carry this history and experience with me. But in my role at the Georgetown Health Foundation as the Vice President of Strategic Philanthropy, I guide all of our philanthropic processes, priorities, and strategies that meet our mission, which is to generate and accelerate positive change in our community's health. We're really reliant on our grant partners to realize our mission, and our partnerships are largely engaged with organizations who are addressing social determinants of health. And Courtney already alluded to social determinants, so I just want to offer this definition. Social determinants of health are the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age, and the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of daily life, including economic policies and systems, development agendas, social norms, social policies, and political systems. So we prioritize social determinants of health as our focus because in our community, resources exist, but there are multiple barriers to accessing them. For several years now, we've tried to balance support for organizations who are trying to remove these barriers for their individual clients, while also supporting multi-year and multi-partner initiatives that work to address these barriers at a systems level. We've also recently integrated health equity language, and Courtney talked about racial equity language, and they're very parallel. We've moved this into our philanthropic framework because we recognize that inequities in health are often socially determined. Health equity strategies seek to increase opportunities for everyone, regardless of their circumstances, to live the healthiest life possible. We view the pursuit of health equity as a way to correct or challenge factors outside a person's control that negatively impact their health, such as lack of resources, education, or income. So we really strive for all of our investments to improve health equity and or social determinants of health. And again, happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing more about your backgrounds. I know I am not alone. I'm feeling like we have very illustrious panel members here today. So obviously, as Courtney shared, and each of you have also referenced as well, we can't really understand Austin's needs without looking at the greater Central Texas region and how all of these different surrounding counties and towns interact with kind of the major metropolitan center. So I'm curious, in each of your roles and with the nonprofits and the communities that you speak with, if you could tell us a little bit more about the specific needs that you're hearing within the area that you fund, and if those needs are changing and how that might look. And Felicia, would you actually get us started with sharing more about the needs you're hearing about?
Sure. So HEB is well known for participating in charitable efforts that target hunger relief and working in disaster relief as well. And so as we see the landscape really change in Austin, there are other issues that we're doing our best to tackle, including helping those that are unhoused find access to food and improve access to food through the amazing partners that we're able to work with, right? So we have relationships across Texas with a network of food banks through Feeding America. And we have found that food banks do this really well. They're able to have the resources and the infrastructure created to be able to serve thousands of people every single week, and then have a network serve and find those organizations who are doing that really well, and then look at our landscape and figure out which communities we've heard from that where there is no access to grocery stores, or there is a food desert, or there is a way for us to find a way, maybe it's not a store at the moment, but it's a way for us to find a food pantry or a mobile food pantry, or find a way to get those communities access to food in a way that makes sense and sustainable until we can figure out a larger solution. And so we're aware, we hear from our neighbors frequently, and we try our best to be a good neighbor. So every single store that you go to at HEB is different in a way that is meaningful to that community, right? So you'll see different selections, different layouts, different opportunities. And in that sense, we always encourage our neighbors to come and talk to us, to work for us, to open up that conversation. And we also are very mindful about how we fund our neighborhoods. So you can go to a store, connect with a store leader, and figure out what funding looks like for your neighborhood soccer team or a PTA, but the larger landscape also helping our state tackle issues like hunger and disaster relief and pandemic relief, depending on what happens. So those are kind of our major focuses right now, but I also don't want to take away from how we're being thoughtful in that sense, looking at racial disparities, looking at issues that are kind of ingrained in injustices, and being thoughtful about how we apply our philanthropy to those issues.
Awesome. Suzy, I'm curious if you have things you would kind of chime in for Georgetown and Williamson County.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. So I would say, in thinking about differences between sort of Austin and surrounding areas, I feel like there are more similarities and differences. And the differences really, I think, lie in structures and how we're organized. Like, for example, in Williamson County, we have multiple municipalities and multiple districts, and it just really makes a coordinated approach to issues like the ones I think we're all wrestling with in the health world, behavioral health and chronic disease, social determinants, access to healthcare, all these different things that have such a huge impact on us that are so big, really difficult to coordinate together and work on a response. And Amy, in our previous conversations, when leading up to this moment, one of the things that I pointed out is this my struggle with the bifurcation too of urban and rural, that polarizing of like everything around Austin is rural. It leaves nothing, we're not talking about what happens in all the in-between spaces of urban and rural. And just wanted to call attention to that, because in suburban areas, I think we're dealing with all urban issues. We just really lack the resources to address them, and as well as the political will. So I see those things as challenges that are kind of unique to the areas that we're serving. But I think the issues and the challenges are pretty much the same.
Suzy, that's excellent. Really, really great perspective. So the St. David's Foundation, our investment area, covers 5 areas. We have a portfolio on resilient children, where our goal there is to work to foster conditions that create positive experiences for young children and their families. In our aging portfolio, we seek to increase support for older adults to live safely and independently in their communities. In the women and girls area, we ensure women and girls are supported with the resources, respect, and conditions vital for equitable health and well-being. Within our clinics portfolio, we continue to support safety net clinics by facilitating the growth of infrastructure and capacity, and support these clinics as they transition to be community hubs for health, so that they offer more than just health care to begin to address some of those health and social issues that impedes patients achieving optimal health. In our rural portfolio, we co-create solutions with the community and invest in place-based initiatives that are community designed and community-led to address prioritized social determinants health, all with the goal of supporting thriving rural communities. In terms of what is changing, I really agree with Suzy. The needs that we see in urban is similar in rural and suburban. The only difference is that sometimes within our rural communities or our small towns, because of the less developed infrastructure, less nonprofits, some of the needs are exacerbated. But I continue to see similar needs in the regions that the foundation works in. In terms of what is new and emerging, we all know the effect of the pandemic. The pandemic has exacerbated already existing issues in terms of unhoused individuals, increase of unhoused individuals that Courtney had referenced. There's also food insecurity, issues around mental health, adequate access to health and human services, and employment that pays living wages. In terms of some of the things that are newly emerging, the pandemic has made broadband and connectivity a need, and I would call it the third utility next to electricity and water. Broadband and connectivity and the associated devices are important for any individual, be it living in rural, urban, suburban, to participate and function in this world, either for school, work, education, or leisure. In terms of newly emerging things we are seeing, we've read a lot and seen a lot about individuals struggling with mental health. That already existed, but when you add the COVID layer, when you add social justice, race issues, it has increased dramatically. We've also seen an increase in shortages in certain areas of employment. For example, caregivers, those individuals that provide support to older adults or even children.
Thank you all. My next question is about trust-based philanthropy, which has been a really big topic for us at Impact Austin. If I could kind of try to summarize it in as few words as possible, it would be a movement that encourages funders to try to keep administrative burden low for nonprofits so that they're able to really focus on the work, and that the funders are able to really partner with them in authentic ways to make that work happen. And some of the things I've heard already from the panel really indicate that y'all also think about trust-based philanthropy. For example, Abena's suggestion that solutions to needs should be community driven is a really great example. I'm curious to hear more about this though, and to know how y'all approach trust-based philanthropy, if that's something that is a mentality for you as well. And Suzy, I will direct this question to you first.
Okay, Amy, thank you. So yeah, big fan of trying to build trust with our grant partners. It's essential, I think, in us being able to really understand where their pain points are and to help address them. So it's really grounded in building that relationship. And one of the things about Women's Giving Circle, where it's really kind of built on the power of volunteers, it's really hard to have, you don't have someone who is just has these sustained relationships over time with organizations in the same way. But we do feel like, we work hard to hear from our grant partners, to understand also how they're hearing from their communities, to engage with the greater community and the people that we're trying to serve through them as well, to inform our priorities and our processes. And they have improved as a result of that feedback, both from the community side and also from the nonprofit side. And really, it's a relationship, and ideally there's reciprocity there. I also just wanted to share too, just kind of from a practical standpoint for folks on the call who are involved with grant making and a part of that decision-making process, that trying to reduce the grant making burden on organizations is, I mean, if you can do it, I think it's invaluable. But again, I think it does have to be built on relationships and understanding over time. Generally we kind of start with a new organization focused maybe on a particular program, and then we grow that relationship to a point where we can really move into funding their general operations. So that's sort of the process that we use, but it's built over years. So yeah, thank you for that question.
And if I can elaborate a little more too, I think when it comes to building relationships and how valuable they are, it goes both ways, right? So how are we as funders showing up for our nonprofit partners and really being thoughtful about how we give to innovative and sustainable opportunities in a way that continues to build trust, and encouraging us as funders to show up in a way that makes sense, right? We don't want to do checkbook philanthropy. We want to get away from that. But if we have resources, whether it's staff time, volunteer time, knowledge and skills, we're unique because we have gift cards where you can buy groceries and flowers and all kinds of stuff in our stores. But just being very thoughtful about how you also interact with the funders beyond the check presentation, right? Really just thinking about ways to involve us. And we really appreciate when the nonprofits trust us to show up, whether it's for a tree planting day out at the park with our volunteers, or during a disaster with a mobile kitchen. Just being thoughtful in a way that makes sense allows us to continue to come back and even proactively reach out and say, hey, we really want to do this again this year. Can you let us know what the progress is on this project? And have that conversation beforehand, before there's a need, more proactively instead of being reactive.
And looking at the 6 principles of trust-based philanthropy, I would say that St. David's Foundation is on this journey. We already approach our work using a strength-based approach. So, for example, in our rural areas, we are working to build the leadership capacity, leadership that is diverse. We are also working on projects that allows communities to participate in the shared giving, allow them to make the decision as to where funding should go within their community in terms of certain projects. And we are also working on continually building relationships and trust. That is key to ensuring that you have that reciprocal relationship with your community. So in terms of the 6 principles of trust-based philanthropy, St. David's Foundation offers multi-year funding to support general operating support. We also do our homework in terms of getting to know the nonprofits and collaboratives within our specific goal areas so that we educate ourselves, we learn from them, and then we find out ways in which they could be supported. We are also on the journey on being transparent and responsive in terms of what we are learning as a foundation, those practices, and what can be improved. Through the Center for Effective Philanthropy's Grantee Perception Report, we are able to have surveys conducted to our nonprofits where we get authentic feedback on what is working, what needs to be improved, and what are the opportunities for us to do our work better. We are also on this journey around simplifying and streamlining paperwork. And along the line, we hope to make some huge changes in that area. And Felicia talked about, beyond the check. It's important that, funders recognize that the work with a nonprofit or the community does not end with a grant check. Funders have relationships with other peer funders or are involved in other programs or projects going on. And so we can quickly link nonprofits or community to other projects that are working, that they are interested in doing. Along supporting groups beyond the check, the foundation has funded field trips for collaboratives to go and learn more about a topic that they want to adopt or a program that they want to learn more about and bring to their community. Last month, we supported a dozen individuals representing government, nonprofits, and residents from Bastrop County to go to Arizona to learn more about their rural transportation program and what is working, and to see what can be brought to Central Texas. The foundation also does a lot around capacity building and technical assistance that is key in supporting nonprofits in them advancing their work. The nonprofits don't have to wait till a grant cycle. We are able to entertain requests for capacity building, either for a consultant to help the nonprofit do XYZ, or it could be for the nonprofit to do research to learn more on an issue. Another thing that we do as a foundation is to sponsor community events. And so a group can approach the foundation for sponsorship dollars, and we're able to provide small funding to support the event. For example, it could be something to do with Black History Month. It could be something to do with a youth mental health summit. It varies from community to community. So these are some of the ways in which St. David's Foundation is working, exemplifying the trust-based principles.
I was listening to those responses with the hat of my nonprofit fundraiser employee perspective, and it was incredibly helpful to hear how y'all are really thinking about things outside the box, I would say, from kind of how philanthropy has traditionally occurred. And I know that for the other nonprofit partners in the audience, we're incredibly grateful for multi-year giving, for the opportunity to ask for general operating support and capacity building projects, because there are a lot of opportunities that do not allow that type of funding. And so when we can come forward to funders we have like y'all who do have that trust perspective, it's really huge. So I'm going to switch hats because my next question is definitely as an Impact Austin member. As y'all heard, we are in the business of making our own grants. And like Suzy spoke to, we don't have the opportunity to have like a one-to-one relationship with nonprofits. And I know from my past experience in the grant review committees that it can be really overwhelming to look at the worthiness of all the organizations because the needs are so deep. And we typically are like, all of these nonprofits are doing something really important. So because y'all are also in giving seats and often have to probably make difficult decisions as well, I'm curious if you have any advice for how you manage that and kind of how you're able to make decisions about what you do fund in a way that just feels really informed and kind of like from the best perspective. And Felicia, I'm actually going to have you get us started on this one.
Perfect. So this question reminds me of the importance of giving circles like Impact Austin, right? And so you have major foundations and corporations who do philanthropy well, like those of us on the call today, and you hear about the focus areas that we are giving to, and we receive hundreds of applications each year that are all really meaningful. But when it comes to the importance of giving circles, it really allows for a community to connect with nonprofits who are needing to just have that conversation with a funder that maybe, you know, because it doesn't fit into one of our pillars, we haven't been able to prioritize that type of organization or what the work that they're doing. Not to say that it's not important, but we just have to focus based off of our philanthropy, what we do really well, because we're a grocery store, because we're a foundation. But giving circles allow those nonprofits to have a space where they can share their work and potentially recruit volunteers, recruit a network of other philanthropists that will talk about their organization and make it more meaningful to them as a person instead of coming to pitch to a foundation or a corporation. And so while we do our best to read every single application and be very thoughtful about how we fund, knowing that there's organizations like Impact Austin, which nonprofits can go to, is really helpful. And so I just wanted to really hone in on the importance of these funds and these giving circles in a way where they fit a very necessary need when it comes to funding our nonprofit network, especially in Austin, and just thank all of the Impact Austin members for the work that they do to be thoughtful. And it can be tough because yes, every organization is worthy, but I also think about it in a way where there's that one person that's really going to appreciate that mission, and how can they be, how can they amplify that message amongst their networks and amongst their friends and their family. And now we have things like Amplify Austin and these giving circles where it's so easy to go online and fundraise and be a voice for this organization. So just know that, you know, if you're the only one interested in this organization, there are others out there that are waiting to hear about it. And as larger funders, we're so appreciative that that's an option for everyone.
Thank you, Felicia. So in this world, we know that the needs always outweighs available resources. And so it's challenging to make decisions to fund programs because there are so many worthy needs and there are so many programs that really address some of the issues that are confronting so many families. But with that in mind, what I would like to offer with this question is that with us being program officers, right, unlike the GRC Committee of Impact Austin, we do this job full-time. And so we are able to cultivate relationships with the nonprofits, learn from them in advance of inviting them to submit a proposal. And so that allows us to bring forth to our board those strong proposals that are more likely to be funded. If on the occasion that we do not fund nonprofits, we get into a conversation with them and let them know why they were not funded. This goes back to the trust-based principles, and also provide guidance and direction on other ways or where they could seek funding from. When we do release an RFP per se, because RFPs, request for proposals, is also one way that we do our work. So we have grant making, where we fund grant projects in 2 cycles that the foundation has. And then we have a request for proposal on a particular issue. For example, last year we released an RFP to area libraries here in Central Texas on an initiative called Libraries for Health. And that is looking at ways in which mental health workers, lay mental health workers, could be embedded within the library setting to increase access to mental wellness resources while building capacity for the library staff as well. And so through RFPs, we are able to review proposals and then, fund some proposals and do not fund some of the other proposals. With the RFP process, we may not have cultivated relationships with the groups that apply. And so we have to have make those hard decisions as to what to fund and not what to fund. And so I really admire what you're doing, JRC. It's not easy. Sometimes it will keep you up at night wondering whether you made the right decision or not. But it's wonderful. And it's also great to always have some guidance, some strategy that you're working towards that you can use to make decisions on what you fund and what you don't fund.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm really interested in that library program you just described. That sounds incredibly creative. And I'm going to give it a Google after I hop out of this discussion, because I want to learn more. So I just did want to ask the audience to submit any questions that you might have for our panelists through the Q&A. We have about 10 more minutes in our discussion. And so please feel free to just go ahead and chime in with anything that you're curious about. But given the opportunity, I'm just going to keep picking these incredible women's brains. So my next question is, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how connected each of you feels to the other funders in Central Texas, and if there are kind of different resources that you look at to understand what other folks are giving to. Felicia gave like the really great example of how community giving groups kind of fit into this networking and ecosystem. And so for connection to other funders and any resources that you use, can I actually hand it back to you, Abena, to get you started on this one? Yes.
So I'm really fortunate to be connected to several funders in the work that we do. For example, with Texas Rural Funders, which is a collaborative of more than 30 Texas-based funders, we are working on ways in which we can spotlight issues going on in rural communities and then come up with solutions, working collaboratively with the community to come up with those solutions. An example of that work we've done is work around broadband. Last year, Texas were fortunate enough to pass HB 5 that allowed Texas to establish a broadband office the very first time, and also to create a broadband plan for the state. That hasn't been done. Texas is one of 6 states in the nation that lacks a broadband plan. And we know that there's lots of issues around broadband access and connectivity. And so with these plans, we are able to determine where the broadband deserts are and be able to have communities write grants to get funding to address those broadband issues. The foundation has also done a lot of funding collaboratives. Recently, we partnered with Austin Community Foundation and United Way around vaccine access and equity projects. And it's wonderful to work collaboratively with other funders, because you tend to learn a lot, and you're able to pool your funds together for that same cause. On a statewide level, St. Davis Foundation is also working with Your Shot, Texas, which is led by Episcopal Health Foundation. And it's a collaborative response of funders to raise confidence in COVID-19 vaccines and to increase access among priority groups and those individuals most affected by the virus, and also historically marginalized populations across the state. Again, we partnered with Austin Community Foundation to do the census count here in our 5-county region by supporting collaboratives in those areas to conduct events that they could share more about the importance of an accurate census count. And there are several other, funder collaboratives that we've been involved in over the years, and I'm looking forward to being involved with others in future.
I have to agree. I love funding collaboratives. I really enjoy being able to connect with other philanthropists, other foundations, to hear what they're funding. Conversations like this are really helpful. I'll have to plug the Corporate Engagement Council that is hosted by the City of Austin and the Mayor's Office. And that brings corporations together to talk about philanthropy and what they're funding, but also hear from nonprofits. There's a space there to have a nonprofit visit during every meeting and talk about the needs that they're seeing, and then how, as corporations, you can collaborate on addressing those needs, whether it's hosting a food drive, a volunteer event, being thoughtful about how we give. But Corporate Engagement Council has been really a really easy way to connect with like-minded peers when it comes to the landscape of philanthropy. And then quickly talk about how, because HEB is unique to Texas, we're also doing this internally, right? So we're collaborating with other departments within HEB to be thoughtful about giving. So we have a diversity department that does supplier diversity as well as diversity initiatives. We have a hunger relief department, a disaster relief department. So if there are ways that we can be more thoughtful funders when it comes to supporting organizations in our regions by collaborating with our internal departments, we're also doing that too in a way that's sustainable. For example, without youth, we recently were able to support their gala, which is a really fun event, but we're also hearing from them about the needs in their pantry. So they have a supplies pantry that donates food and necessities to other youth who are LGBTQ identifying or experiencing homelessness. And that was our way of involving our hunger relief team, our diversity team, and our regional team to be able to fund the gala, which is a major fundraiser, and the food pantry, and set them up for a sustainable year. And that was just an internal evaluation of how we could be more thoughtful in our giving. So it's really great to also have resources externally, but that is something that's top of mind, is that we're being efficient and very thoughtful when it comes to giving.
So cool, Felicia. Thank you for sharing. I feel like I'm learning so much more about HEB than I ever knew in the work that you do. I guess I just wanted to chime in really quickly and share that, from the, not being in Travis County in the Austin area, I don't see collaboration happening as much as I wish I did. It absolutely does happen. And I appreciate the involvement and engagement with organizations like St. David's Foundation and the Austin Community Foundation to participate in different kinds of work. I guess what I will say, I feel like it is, at least from my lens, more the exception than the rule, that we are coordinating resources and really thinking through, Courtney's call to action around, we need to be learning together, but we also need to be acting together and figuring out how to do that. I'd love to see more movement on making those certain things happen that we are all affected by.
And I want to add that, Suzy has been such a great thought partner for me and also for the foundation. We are currently involved in doing the community health needs assessment, which informs what the foundation invests in. We're able to get information and data there that informs our strategic plan. And so Suzy has been a partner in those conversations, and I really value the thought partnership that we're able to get from our fellow funders.
Awesome. Well, we've received 3 amazing questions in the chat, so I'm going to see if we can get through those. The first is from Karen, and it says, as you move to lighten the load on your nonprofit applicants, how have you changed financial statement requirements during the application process? And for me, as somebody who fills out applications many times, one of my first responses was, a lot of funders now let us submit stuff the way we already use it formatted wise in our organization. So like when I can upload my completed audit from the third party instead of hand keying in information from it, that makes a huge difference. So what other types of things are y'all doing to help keep that financial statement requirement burden low?
So at St. David's Foundation, we are fortunate to have a financial compliance manager. And so she's able to review all kinds of statements from the applicants and also follow up and have conversations. When it comes to audit requirements, the nonprofits do not have to have an audit to apply for funding. But what I say to potential applicants is to always reach out to the foundation and have a dialogue. Don't wait till a day before or the Saturday before an application is due on Tuesday and try and get a question answered. We've had this relationship with the nonprofits, and so we really would appreciate them reaching out to us in advance with any questions. And what I don't know, what my other colleagues don't know, we seek the answers and circle back.
Yeah, so we only require nonprofit paperwork. So we don't necessarily require any financial statements. We just need the W-9 and your official nonprofit paperwork. And then we do ask for a pretty quick recap of any past funding that we've given your organization. So it's not super intense. And just to kind of follow up on the next question that we saw in the chat. So after evaluating an organization and getting the necessary information, if we are declining a request, we do our best to provide feedback in a way that's meaningful, or if we're adjusting the request, not maybe funding it fully, we provide feedback about that too. And it can be difficult because we do receive a high volume of requests every week. And so if I've already had a conversation with someone, if I had a via email or at a networking event, explain to them, hey, in order to make your request stand out, let's see all of the opportunities at once, right? So instead of having you submit an application for support for every single event and program that you all do where you'd like our support, let's see one application that has options for us to be able to say, hey, our fall is really busy, but we love that you're doing a summer camp. Can we support the summer initiative instead? We want to be able to provide kids access to opportunities. So let's see all of them so that we can then have a conversation with you following up and say, hey, tell me more about this one. Can you use gift cards for this? Can we be creative with this and do in-kind product instead of funding the first year? So just being very thoughtful about how you actually submit an application outside of the financial paperwork. We're trying to avoid how tedious that is, but hear more about exactly what you're doing when it comes to the mission of your work. And a lot of that is just shooting us a quick email, sending us a follow-up call and saying, hey, can I just take 10 minutes to talk about how I could have changed this? And I'm happy to have those conversations. It is hard for us to get to every single opportunity, but we want to hear from you all if you have passion to connect with us and in a way that's meaningful to the organization.
I just wanted to quickly share something that we've done recently is we do require an audit for any organization applying for funding more than $25,000. But for those applying for a smaller grant, we actually asked for an independent review from a CPA, which is hopefully a little more affordable. And then for organizations who are really just getting started, because we have this kind of restriction, we use some of our discretionary funding, like mini grant funding, essentially, and give them the option, like when they try to enter our process, but the barrier is the financial statements. We say, how about we use some of our discretionary funding to fund the ability for you to get those things, because we know that also is a gateway to accessing additional funding. So we have a few different ways to kind of work around with organizations, particularly those that have smaller budgets or just getting going. So just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. And I think that y'all actually did address some of the things that fall into the next question from Anne about if you would share more information about the feedback you give to grant applicants who do not approve for funding. I know Felicia spoke beautifully to that. Is there anything else that y'all would add, just kind of how you communicate that?
If I could jump in there, because that's, I mentioned that I was a grant writer, back in the day, and hearing no with no explanation, or hearing nothing, it didn't help me get better. And so it's so important to me to be able to provide that feedback. And it also, feeds into this trust-based work that we're trying to do as well, and that relationship building. And so I tell people when we say no. I also give people feedback when I think something can be better. And I always try to use those moments to say, how can I be better? How can we be better as well? So, it kind of opens that door for that reciprocity that we're looking for in relationship building. So, yeah.
And what I'll quickly add to that is that sometimes great ideas are expressed in a proposal, but sometimes it doesn't come out well. And so one of my colleagues, when she released an RFP, included in it access to a grant writer. And so applicants could reach out to the grant writer to get support in shaping their ideas and writing their proposal.
All right, and so for our last question, I know our time is limited with y'all today, but we're going to squeeze in one more before we head over into our breakouts. So this is actually from one of Abena's colleagues at St. David's Foundation, Lourdes. So to the point being made about addressing the need, so the cause of the need, the root causes, could you expand on the ways that you use your influence, reputation, or networks to educate decision makers? So decision makers being policymakers, but just basically anybody who might be in a position of power.
So I'll quickly respond and say that what I've learned in doing work outside Travis County is that it's important to develop relationships with individuals who know those decision makers and who could facilitate a connection for me to meet those decision makers. And those kinds of connections, using individuals that have already developed relationships with to reach policymakers and decision makers, has been very helpful.
So as a place-based funder, we do have an opportunity to kind of influence a relatively small sphere, but we have really leveraged the research we've done in the community to surface community voice that's led to our prioritization of our philanthropy, and shared that with organizations and government and the business community here, as far as we can really reach to share that information with them. Part of the work that we did was surfacing issues around discrimination and racism and a range of things that we all need to be thinking about, and thinking about how our individual organizations and institutions are contributing. And so we've done work as well with our grant partners to try to unpack that with them, and think through how to do that work better, and to make the places and spaces when people have needs, make them a more welcoming and loving space for folks. So
yeah, and I'll quickly speak on that too. So we do a lot of that when it comes to education work, right? So we have created the Holdsworth Center, which is a space out in Lake Austin that is bringing public school teachers and superintendents and principals to the Holdsworth Center to get a really awesome experience when it comes to top level world-class learning and education initiatives. And so that's just one way, right? But we are also advocating for public school education in a variety of ways. Raise Your Hand Texas. So our organization, because education is so passionate to our founder, has really taken a lead on being that go-to when it comes to really improving a space for public education teachers. And so that's on the corporate level. I know personally, as a Latina in Austin, Texas, having grown up in the Rio Grande Valley, it's important to me to be tied into issues that are affecting the Latino community here in Austin. And so I'm able to serve on the Quality of Life Commission, the Hispanic Quality of Life Commission on behalf of the mayor, and also just tied into what the community is facing outside of my office walls, and just going to events, having conversations with leaders in the community who are leading small organizations in Del Valley or in Southeast Austin or on Runberg, and talking to our store leaders about what they're hearing from the neighborhoods. So just again, being very thoughtful about those conversations, because we have resources as a grocery store that can be really intentional and really huge for our neighbors and our communities. So there are a few different ways that we're getting involved, but we're always open to hearing feedback about, what we can do to be a better partner, to be a better neighbor, and having that open mind really allows us to hear about the need instead of coming forward thinking we know what the need is, because I know that's ever changing. So again, as a funder, just being really open to hearing how we can be a better asset and how we can be thoughtful in that giving, but also in that thought leadership with other community leaders.
Awesome. Well, I have taken like a page and a half of notes, and I know that I am not alone in having received just so much insights and helpful information from y'all. So I just want to offer you each a huge thank you for lending your expertise and your time for Impact Austin. I am sure you've already seen some of your thanks and shout out in the chat, but this is extremely appreciated. And I am really grateful that y'all came to share and that everyone tuned in today to learn alongside me. I want to send out another thank you to our title sponsor, Baird, and a special shout out and thank you to Courtney Bailey for opening the session for us. And lastly, a personal thank you from me to Christina, Impact Austin's Executive Director, for asking me to moderate today. It has been a real joy. Just as a reminder, if you would like to continue the conversation and breakouts, there will be that option. As you see right now, there's a QR code where you can hop over into the breakout discussions and continue having a conversation about the needs and how philanthropy in Central Texas is trying to meet those needs. Thanks again, everyone. On behalf of Impact Austin, we are really grateful to have you all here today, and I hope that everybody has a wonderful rest of your Friday. Bye.